The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before an ornate mahogany display case in what was once Princess Diana's private dressing room. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gazed at the collection of jewels that had belonged to her late mother-in-law, each piece telling its own story of royal duty, personal triumph, and sometimes profound sadness. Among the glittering array of tiaras, brooches, and earrings, one piece stood out with particular significance. It was a sapphire and diamond necklace, its deep blue center stone surrounded by a halo of brilliant diamonds, suspended from a delicate platinum chain. This wasn't just any piece of royal jewelry. This was the necklace Diana had worn to her first solo royal engagement after a separation from Charles, a symbol of her independence and strength during one of the most challenging periods of her life. Kate had seen this necklace countless times in photographs, always admiring how it had complemented Diana's radiant smile and confident demeanor. Now, standing here in the very room where Diana had once prepared for her royal duties, Kate felt the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. She wasn't just William's wife or the future queen consort. She was the woman who had stepped into shoes that many believed could never be filled. The upcoming state dinner with the visiting French president was to be Kate's most significant solo appearance since becoming Princess of Wales. William would be attending to urgent matters in Scotland, leaving Kate to represent the royal family alone. The pressure was immense, and she had spent weeks preparing for every possible scenario, studying protocols, memorizing names and faces, and perfecting her French pronunciation. It had been William's suggestion that she wear something of his mother's to the dinner. "She would have wanted you to have it," he had said quietly one evening as they reviewed the guest list together. "You carry her legacy forward in your own way, Kate. This would be a beautiful tribute." The palace staff had been notified of her visit to the jewelry collection that morning. Margaret Whitfield, the elderly keeper of the royal jewels who had served Diana personally, stood nearby with a ring of ancient keys. Her weathered face showed a mixture of emotions as she watched Kate approach the display case. "Your Royal Highness," Margaret said softly, her voice carrying the weight of decades of service. Princess Diana wore this particular necklace 17 times during her years as Princess of Wales. Each occasion is documented in our records. Kate nodded, her throat tight with emotion. She had studied those records meticulously, learning about each event where Diana had chosen this piece. There was the charity gala for children with leukemia, where Diana had spent hours talking with young patients and their families. There was the diplomatic reception, where she had charmed skeptical foreign dignitaries with her warmth and genuine interest in their cultures. And there was that pivotal night at the opera, her first major appearance after the separation, where she had walked the red carpet alone, head held high, the sapphire catching the flash of 1,000 cameras. "May I?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded and began the elaborate process of unlocking the case. The security protocols were extensive, requiring multiple keys and a biometric scan. As the case finally opened, Kate caught her breath. Up close, the necklace was even more stunning than in photographs. The sapphire seemed to pulse with an inner light, and the diamonds sparkled like captured starlight. Princess Diana called it her courage stone, Margaret revealed, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She said wearing it made her feel brave when she needed it most. Kate reached out slowly, her fingers hovering just above the necklace. She could almost feel the history emanating from it, the hopes and dreams and struggles of the woman who had worn it before her. In that moment, she felt a profound connection to Diana, understanding perhaps for the first time the true weight of the role she had inherited. "She chose this piece herself, you know," Margaret continued, her voice taking on a storytelling quality. "It wasn't part of the official royal collection at first. The Prince of Wales had it commissioned as a gift for her 30th birthday. She loved it immediately because the sapphire reminded her of her engagement ring." Kate smiled at this detail. Her own engagement ring, the very one that had belonged to Diana, sat firmly on her finger, a constant reminder of the continuing story she was now part of. She had grown accustomed to its weight over the years, but she never took for granted the significance of wearing it. "The French president's dinner," Kate said, finally finding her voice. I think she would approve of it being worn for diplomacy." She understood the power of these symbols. Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "She did indeed, Your Royal Highness." Princess Diana knew that every piece of jewelry, every outfit, every gesture was part of the greater narrative of the monarchy. But she also knew how to make it personal, how to use these trappings to connect with people on a human level. This was what Kate admired most about Diana's legacy. Yes, she had been glamorous and photogenic, but more importantly, she had possessed a remarkable ability to use her position to bring attention to causes that mattered, to make people feel seen and valued. It was a standard that Kate strove to meet in her own work, though she knew her approach was different from Diana's more instinctive methods. "I've been studying the protocols for the state dinner," Kate said, still gazing at the necklace. "The French delegation includes several members who met Princess Diana during her visits to France. I thought wearing this might be a way to honor those connections." Margaret nodded approvingly. She had a special relationship with France. They understood her in a way that sometimes her own country struggled to do. She found freedom there, especially in those difficult final years. The reference to Diana's last summer in France hung unspoken between them. Kate had been just a teenager when Diana died, but she remembered the shock and grief that had gripped the nation. She remembered watching the funeral on television, seeing William and Harry walking behind their mother's coffin, never imagining that one day she would marry that brave young boy and take on the role his mother had once filled. "There's something you should know," Margaret said, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone. "His Majesty, the King, has not seen this piece since it was returned to the collection. He specifically requested that it be kept here with Diana's other personal items, rather than in the main crown jewel vault." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that choosing to wear Diana's necklace would be significant, but she hadn't fully considered Charles's reaction. The relationship between Charles and Diana had been complicated, to say the least, and even now, all these years later, there were wounds that had never fully healed. "Does he know I'm here today?" Kate asked. Margaret hesitated before answering. "The palace staff were informed of your visit, Your Royal Highness." Standard protocol. Which meant yes, Charles would know. Kate wondered if he would object, if he would see her choice as presumptuous or inappropriate. She had worked hard to build a good relationship with her father-in-law over the years, showing him respect while also gently modernizing some of the stuffier aspects of royal life. They had found common ground in their love for William and the grandchildren and in their shared commitment to environmental causes. But Diana's ghost still lingered in the corners of every royal residence, in the unspoken memories and the carefully navigated conversations. Kate had learned to tread carefully around certain topics, to read the subtle shifts in mood when Diana's name arose. She had her own relationship with Diana's memory, built through William's stories and her own research, but she was always conscious of not overstepping. "Perhaps I should choose something else," Kate said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "There are other beautiful pieces that would be appropriate for the dinner." Margaret studied her with wise eyes. "May I speak freely, Your Royal Highness?" Kate nodded. Princess Diana would have wanted her jewelry to be worn, to be part of life rather than locked away in cases. She believed these pieces should serve the monarchy and the people, not become museum artifacts. And, if I may say so, she would have been pleased to see you wearing them. You honor her memory not by trying to be her, but by being yourself while carrying forward the best of what she represented. The words settled over Kate like a benediction. She had spent so many years worried about comparisons, about living up to an impossible standard set by a woman who had become almost mythical in death. But Margaret was right. The way to honor Diana was not through imitation, but through dedication to the same values Diana had championed: compassion, service, and using the platform of royalty to make a real difference in people's lives. When she wore this necklace, Margaret continued, warming to her subject. She paired it with a midnight blue velvet gown designed by Catherine Walker. The combination was stunning, but more importantly, it projected confidence and authority. She was saying to the world, I am still here, I'm still working, and I'm not defeated. Kate could picture it perfectly. She had seen the photographs from that night, Diana arriving at the Royal Opera House, the flashbulbs creating a constellation around her. The press had been brutal in their coverage of the separation, but Diana had faced them with grace and determination. The necklace had caught the light with every turn of her head, a glittering reminder of her status and her strength. I have a gown, Kate said slowly, thinking of the deep emerald creation hanging in her dressing room. It's by Sarah Burton. The color would complement the sapphire beautifully. Margaret smiled. Princess Diana always said that jewelry should enhance the woman, not overshadow her. She chose pieces that told a story that had meaning beyond their monetary value. This was what Kate understood instinctively. Every appearance was an opportunity to communicate without words, to show support for causes and creators, to demonstrate continuity with the past while moving toward the future. The French state dinner was particularly important given the complex history between the two nations and the need to strengthen post-Brexit relationships. There's a young French designer, Kate said, thinking out loud, who creates sustainable jewelry inspired by historical pieces. I've been considering commissioning something from her for the dinner. But wearing this, she gestured to Diana's necklace, would send a different message. One about continuity, about the enduring bonds between our nations that transcend political changes. Margaret beamed with approval. You understand perfectly, Your Royal Highness. Princess Diana often said that diplomacy was about finding common ground in shared memories and experiences. Kate made her decision in that moment. She would wear Diana's courage stone to the state dinner. She would carry that legacy forward, not as an imitation, but as an evolution. She would honor the past while creating her own future. I'll need to inform His Majesty, Kate said, already mentally preparing for that conversation. It's only proper that he knows my intentions. Very wise, Your Royal Highness, Margaret agreed. Transparency in these matters is always best. As Kate prepared to leave, taking one last look at the necklace that would soon adorn her neck, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She had spent so many years walking in Diana's shadow, careful not to invoke too many comparisons, cautious about claiming any part of that complicated legacy. But perhaps it was time to step more fully into the light, to acknowledge that she was not just William's wife, but Diana's successor in a very real way. The walk back through the palace corridors seemed shorter than usual, her mind already racing ahead to the preparations needed for the dinner. She would need to coordinate with her team about the messaging around the jewelry choice, ensuring it was framed respectfully and appropriately. The press would inevitably make the Diana connection, and she wanted to be ahead of the narrative. As she passed through the picture gallery, Kate paused before a portrait of Diana, painted just a year before her death. The artist had captured something ineffable in her expression, a mixture of sadness and determination that spoke to the complexities of her position. Kate had passed this portrait hundreds of times, but today she stopped and really looked. I hope I make you proud, she whispered to the painting. I hope I'm doing this right. There was no answer, of course, but Kate felt a subtle shift in the air around her, as if the palace itself was acknowledging her words. She straightened her shoulders and continued on her way, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floors. Back in her private office, Kate found her assistant Lauren already fielding calls about the upcoming dinner. The guest list had been finalized, the menu approved, and the entertainment selected. All that remained were the final details, including her choice of jewelry. Lauren, Kate said, settling behind her desk, I need to schedule a meeting with His Majesty. This afternoon, if possible. Lauren's efficient fingers flew over her tablet. He has a gap at 3 o'clock, Your Royal Highness. Shall I request a private audience? Yes, please. And mark it as personal, not official business. As Lauren made the arrangements, Kate pulled out her planning folder for the state dinner. Every detail had been meticulously organized, from the floral arrangements that would incorporate both British roses and French lilies to the carefully curated menu that honored both nations' culinary traditions. But now, with the decision to wear Diana's necklace, everything took on new significance. She thought about the French president's wife, a woman known for her own strong sense of style and her commitment to education reform. They had met several times before and had developed a warm rapport. Kate wondered if she would understand the significance of the necklace choice, if she would see it as the bridge-building gesture Kate intended it to be. The phone on her desk chimed softly. William was calling from Scotland. Kate smiled as she answered, grateful as always for his steadying presence in her life, even from a distance. "How did it go?" he asked without preamble. He knew about her visit to the jewelry collection, had encouraged it despite knowing it would stir up complicated emotions for everyone involved. "I'm going to wear the sapphire," Kate told him. "The one from her 30th birthday." There was a pause on the line, and Kate could picture William processing this information. He had his own complicated relationship with his mother's possessions, protective of her memory while also understanding the need to move forward. "She would have loved that," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "You know she would have adored you, Kate. She would have been so proud of the work you're doing." Kate felt tears prick at her eyes. These moments of emotional honesty from William, when he let down his royal guard and spoke just as a son missing his mother, were precious and rare. "I'm meeting with your father this afternoon," she said. "I want to make sure he's comfortable with my choice." William sighed. "That's wise. He'll appreciate the consideration, even if it's difficult for him. You know how he is about anything connected to her." Indeed, Kate did know. Charles's feelings about Diana were a complex tangle of regret, guilt, frustration, and, yes, still a form of love. The narrative of their relationship had been written and rewritten so many times by the press and public that sometimes it seemed even the principals had lost track of the truth. "I'll be gentle," Kate promised. "This isn't about dredging up the past. It's about honoring it while moving forward." "You always know just what to say," William said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I wish I could be there for the dinner." "I hate that you're doing this alone." "I won't be alone," Kate reminded him. "I'll have the entire palace staff, the Foreign Office team, and, most importantly, I'll have your mother's courage stone around my neck." They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, and the children, who were excited about the formal dinner even though they wouldn't be attending. George had been practicing his French phrases, while Charlotte had drawn pictures of the Eiffel Tower to show the visitors. Louis, in typical fashion, had announced he would teach the French president how to play football in the palace gardens. After ending the call, Kate spent the next hour reviewing her notes for the dinner. She had memorized key facts about each guest, prepared talking points on various subjects from climate change to cultural exchange programs, and practiced her welcome speech until it was perfect. But now, knowing she would be wearing Diana's necklace, she felt the need to revisit everything with fresh eyes. The necklace would be a conversation starter, she knew. People would want to know the story behind it, the significance of her choice. She would need to be prepared with graceful responses that honored Diana's memory without dwelling on the past, that acknowledged the history while focusing on the future. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lauren entered with a tea tray and a concerned expression. "Your Royal Highness, I've just received word that His Majesty can see you at 3 as requested, but—" She hesitated. "But," Kate prompted gently. His private secretary mentioned that His Majesty seemed unsettled when told of your request. He asked specifically if it was about the jewelry collection visit. So Charles already knew. Kate wasn't surprised. The palace had an efficient communication network, and news of her visit to Diana's collection would have reached him quickly. She wondered what his initial reaction had been, if he had felt the old wounds reopening, or if time had finally provided enough distance for acceptance. "Thank you, Lauren. Please confirm the 3 o'clock meeting." As Lauren left, Kate stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. She could see gardeners preparing the flower beds for the state dinner's outdoor reception, their movements precise and practiced. Everything at the palace ran like clockwork, each person knowing their role in the greater machinery of monarchy. But beneath that smooth surface, human emotions still roiled. Charles was not just a king. He was a man with a complicated past. Diana was not just a deceased princess. She was the mother of the future king, and the woman whose shadow still fell across every royal event. And Kate was not just performing a role. She was a woman trying to honor the past while creating her own legacy. The next few hours passed quickly as Kate attended to various duties. She reviewed correspondence, approved social media posts for upcoming engagements, and had a video call with one of her patronages about their new mental health initiative. Through it all, her mind kept returning to the upcoming meeting with Charles. At 2:45, Kate made her way to Charles's private study. The route took her through parts of the palace the public never saw, corridors lined with family photographs rather than priceless art, rooms where the royals could be themselves rather than symbols. She paused before a photograph of Charles and Diana on their wedding day, both so young and hopeful, unaware of the trials that lay ahead. "Your Royal Highness," the footman announced as she reached Charles's study. "His Majesty is ready for you." Kate took a deep breath, straightened her dress, and entered the room where she would make her case for wearing Diana's courage stone. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and casting golden light on the dark wood furnishings. Charles stood with his back to her, gazing out at the gardens, his posture rigid with tension. "Your Majesty," Kate said softly, dropping into a brief curtsy even though he couldn't see her. Charles turned slowly, and Kate was struck by how much older he looked in the afternoon light. The crown weighed heavily on him, she knew, but it wasn't just the responsibilities of kingship that aged him. It was the accumulation of decisions made and unmade, of roads taken and not taken, of a life lived in the public eye where every choice was scrutinized and judged. "Catherine," he said, using her formal name as he did when he was feeling particularly royal. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss." As Kate settled into the offered chair, she noticed Charles's hands were trembling slightly. This conversation, she realized, was going to be even more difficult than she had anticipated. The Courage Stone's legacy was about to face its newest test. Charles remained standing for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the antique desk that had belonged to his grandfather. The silence in the study grew heavy, filled with unspoken words and memories that seemed to press against the walls. Kate waited, having learned over the years that patience was often the best approach with her father-in-law. Finally, Charles moved to his chair, settling into it with the careful movements of a man who felt every one of his years. His blue eyes, so like William's in shape, but carrying far more shadows, fixed on Kate with an intensity that made her straighten involuntarily. "Margaret Whitfield called me this morning," he began, his voice carefully neutral. "She felt I should know about your visit to the collection." Kate nodded. "I was planning to discuss it with you, Your Majesty. That's why I requested this meeting." "The sapphire necklace," Charles continued as if she hadn't spoken. "You want to wear it to the French state dinner." It wasn't a question, but Kate answered anyway. "I believe it would be appropriate for the occasion, sir." "The diplomatic significance. I know what significance it holds," Charles interrupted, his voice sharp. Then, seemingly catching himself, he softened his tone. "Forgive me, Catherine. This is difficult." Kate leaned forward slightly. "I understand, sir. That's why I wanted to speak with you personally. The last thing I want is to cause you distress." Charles gave a bitter laugh. "Distress? Yes, well, that particular piece of jewelry has caused quite enough of that over the years." He stood abruptly and walked to a cabinet, pouring himself a measure of whiskey despite the early hour. He gestured to Kate, who shook her head. "Do you know the full story of that necklace?" he asked, his back to her as he gazed at the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. "I know you had a commission for her 30th birthday," Kate replied carefully. Charles turned, a sad smile playing at his lips. "I spent months working with the jeweler. I wanted something that would show her I understood her, that I saw her strength. The sapphire was chosen specifically to match her engagement ring. I thought," He trailed off, taking a sip of whiskey. Kate remained silent, sensing there was more he needed to say. I thought it would fix things, Charles continued, his voice barely above a whisper. As if a necklace, no matter how beautiful, could bridge the gulf that had grown between us. She wore it exactly twice during our marriage. The third time was after we separated. The pain in his voice was raw, even after all these years. Kate felt a wave of compassion for this complex man who had spent his life trying to balance duty with desire, tradition with progress. She called it her courage stone. Kate offered gently. Charles's head snapped up. Did she? I didn't know that. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. Courage. Yes, she had that in abundance. Sometimes too much for her own good. He returned to his chair, setting the whiskey aside, untouched. Tell me, Catherine, why this piece? There are dozens of other options in the collection. Tiaras, brooches, necklaces that don't carry such weight. Kate had anticipated this question and had spent considerable time thinking about her answer. Because, Your Majesty, I believe it's time. Time to let these pieces live again, to serve their purpose as symbols of the monarchy's continuity and strength. The French president's wife mentioned in our last conversation how much she admired Diana's work with landmine victims. Wearing this necklace would be a subtle acknowledgement of that shared humanitarian ground. Charles studied her for a long moment. Kate met his gaze steadily, letting him see her sincerity. You're not trying to be her, he said finally. It was a statement, not a question. No, sir. I couldn't even if I wanted to. But I do want to honor the best of what she represented while creating my own path forward. Charles leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. You know, Catherine, in all the years since she died, I've avoided that collection. Oh, I've dealt with the official pieces, the tiaras, and such that belong to the crown. But her personal items, the things I gave her, he shook his head. I had them placed in that room and locked away. Perhaps that was cowardly of me. I think it was human, Kate said softly. A ghost of a smile crossed Charles's face. William is fortunate in you, my dear. You have a gift for saying the right thing. I learned from watching you, Kate replied, earning a look of genuine surprise from the king. Me? Charles seemed genuinely taken aback. Your dedication to duty, your patience with the press even when they're being unfair, your commitment to causes that matter even when they're not popular. I've watched and learned, sir. Charles was quiet for a moment, visibly moved. You're very kind, Catherine. Kinder perhaps than I deserve. He stood and walked back to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in a pose Kate recognized as his thinking stance. The night I gave her that necklace, he said, his voice distant with memory, we were at Highgrove. I'd arranged a private dinner, just the two of us. It had been months since we'd been alone together, without the weight of schedules and duties. I thought perhaps. He didn't finish the thought, but Kate could fill in the blanks. By Diana's 30th birthday, their marriage had been in serious trouble. The fairy tale had long since crumbled, replaced by a reality neither of them had been prepared for. She was gracious about it, Charles continued. Thanked me prettily, word to dinner. But I could see in her eyes that it was too late for grand gestures. We were too different, wanted different things. The necklace became just another beautiful object in a life full of beautiful objects that couldn't mask the fundamental incompatibility between us. Kate stood and moved closer to Charles, though she maintained a respectful distance. Your Majesty, if I may, that necklace may have started as a symbol of what couldn't be fixed, but Diana transformed it into something else. She wore it to some of her most important engagements, used it as armor when she needed strength. Perhaps it's time to let it be transformed again. Charles turned to look at her, and Kate was struck by the vulnerability in his expression. Here was a king, a man who commanded respect and wielded enormous privilege, but who was also just a human being carrying the weight of past mistakes and lost opportunities. You remind me of her sometimes, he said suddenly, not in looks or manner, but in your determination to use this platform for good. She never understood that I admired that about her, even when it complicated our lives immeasurably. I think she knew, Kate said gently. William tells me stories sometimes, about moments when you supported her work even when it went against protocol. The AIDS hospital visits, the landmine campaign. You could have stopped her, but you didn't. Charles's eyes glistened. I learned too late that trying to contain Diana was like trying to hold sunlight in your hands. The tighter you grasped, the more it slipped away. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What does William think about you wearing the necklace?" "He supports it," Kate replied. "He says his mother would have wanted her jewelry to be worn, not locked away." "Yes," Charles said slowly. She hated the idea of things being shut away in vaults. So it was like burying beauty alive. He moved back to his desk, shuffling some papers absently. The French will certainly remember that necklace. She wore it to the Versailles Gala in '94, charmed everyone in sight, including several officials who were prepared to dislike her on principle. Kate sensed a shift in the conversation. Charles was moving from emotional resistance to practical consideration, a transition she'd witnessed many times before when he was processing difficult decisions. "The diplomatic angle is sound," he continued, his tone becoming more businesslike. "France has always had a special affection for Diana, and acknowledging that connection could be valuable given current circumstances." He looked up at Kate. "You've thought this through carefully." "I've tried to, sir. I know how important this state visit is, especially now. Every gesture matters." Charles nodded slowly. "Indeed. And you understand that the press will make this a story? There will be comparisons, headlines about you stepping into her shoes, all that nonsense they love to print." "I'm prepared for that," Kate assured him. "My team has already begun working on messaging that emphasizes continuity and respect rather than comparison." Charles moved to his desk and sat down, pulling out a sheet of palace letterhead. To Kate's surprise, he began writing. "I'm making a note for the Lord Chamberlain's office. You're to have full access to Diana's collection, not just for this dinner, but going forward. It's time those pieces served their purpose again." Kate felt a rush of emotion at this unexpected gesture. "Your Majesty, I thank you." Charles finished writing and looked up. "There are conditions, Catherine." "Of course. First, you'll consult with me before wearing any piece for the first time. Not for permission, but for preparation. Some pieces carry more weight than others, and I'd appreciate the warning." Kate nodded. "Absolutely, sir." "Second, when asked about the jewelry, you'll emphasize their role in supporting the monarchy and the causes we champion. No dwelling on the past. No feeding the media's appetite for drama." "I understand completely." "And third," Charles's voice softened, "you'll help William navigate this. He pretends it doesn't affect him, but seeing his mother's things, it can be difficult for him." "Always," Kate promised. Charles sealed the note and handed it to her. "Then it's settled. You'll wear the sapphire necklace to the state dinner." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "And you'll look magnificent in it, I'm sure." Kate felt tears prick her eyes at the compliment. "Thank you, Your Majesty. This means more than you know." Charles waved a hand dismissively, but she could see he was pleased. "Just promise me one thing, Catherine. Don't let it become a burden. Diana's legacy is powerful, but it shouldn't overshadow your own contributions. You've brought a steady grace to this family that we desperately needed. Don't lose that in trying to honor the past." "I won't," Kate promised. "I see it as adding to the story, not replacing it." "Good." Charles stood, signaling the end of their meeting. But as Kate curtsied and turned to leave, he called her back. "Catherine." She turned. "Yes, Your Majesty." "With the matching earrings, too. If you're going to do this, do it properly." Kate smiled, understanding the gesture for what it was, not just permission, but a blessing. "I will, sir." "Thank you." As she left the study, Kate felt a profound sense of relief mixed with responsibility. The conversation had gone better than she had dared hope, but it had also reminded her of the deep currents of emotion that still ran through the royal family when it came to Diana. Walking back through the palace corridors, she pulled out her phone to text William. "Meeting went well. Your father was wonderful, wearing the full set." His response came quickly. "Proud of you both." Mom would be smiling. Kate's next stop was the communications office, where her press secretary, James Thornton, was waiting with his team. The conference room was already set up with laptops, phones, and the ever-present tea service that fueled palace operations. "Your Royal Highness," James greeted her, his usually cheerful face serious. "I take it the meeting with His Majesty was productive?" "Very," Kate confirmed, taking her seat at the head of the table. "We have approval to wear the sapphire necklace and earrings. Now, we need to control the narrative." James's assistant, Patricia, was already typing notes. "The press will go wild," she said. "It's been years since anyone's worn Diana's personal collection publicly." "Exactly why we need to be prepared," Kate said. "I want talking points ready for every possible angle. The focus should be on honoring the past while serving the present. This is about diplomatic relations, supporting the monarchy's work, and, yes, paying tribute to Diana's legacy, but in a forward-looking way." James nodded, his fingers flying over his tablet. "I suggest we leak it strategically. Perhaps a palace source, mentioning it to Rebecca English at the Mail. She's always been fair in her coverage." Kate considered this. The relationship between the palace and the press was complex, built on mutual need and careful negotiation. Strategic leaks were part of the game, a way to control timing and framing. "Yes, but not until the day before the dinner," she decided. "I don't want a week of speculation and analysis. A subtle mention that I'll be wearing a piece from Diana's collection, focusing on the diplomatic significance." "What about social media?" Patricia asked. "The younger demographic will want to see this as a feminist moment. The new Princess of Wales claiming her place." Kate smiled. "Then let's give them that narrative, but carefully. A post about the power of women in diplomacy, perhaps featuring other royal women who've used fashion and jewelry as diplomatic tools. Make it educational rather than sensational." The team spent the next hour crafting strategies, anticipating questions, and preparing responses. They discussed everything from the exact wording of social media posts to the positioning Kate should maintain when photographers inevitably zoomed in on the necklace. "There's one more thing," Kate said as the meeting wound down. "I want to commission a new piece from that French designer I mentioned, Amélie Rousseau. Something that complements Diana's necklace, but stands on its own. A brooch, perhaps, that I can give to the French president's wife as a gift." James's eyes lit up. Brilliant. Connecting past and present, honoring tradition while fostering new relationships. The symbolism is perfect. As her team dispersed to implement their plans, Kate made her way to her private dressing room where her stylist, Natasha Archer, was waiting with the emerald gown selected for the dinner. "I heard the news," Natasha said, her face glowing with excitement. "The sapphire necklace. Oh, Kate, it's going to be stunning." Together, they examined the gown, discussing how best to showcase the necklace without overwhelming the overall look. The dress was elegantly simple, with a modest neckline that would frame the jewelry perfectly. "We'll need to adjust the hair," Natasha mused, pulling out her inspiration boards. "An updo, definitely, to show the necklace and earrings. But soft, romantic, not too severe." Kate nodded, trusting Natasha's judgment implicitly. They'd worked together for over a decade, developing a shorthand that made these preparations seamless. "I want to do a practice run," Kate decided. "Full hair, makeup, dress, and jewelry. I need to know how it feels, how it moves. Of course, I'll coordinate with Margaret Whitfield to have the pieces brought here tomorrow." As the afternoon wore on, Kate found herself increasingly aware of the magnitude of what she was undertaking. It wasn't just about wearing a necklace. It was about stepping more fully into a role that had been defined by someone else's tragedy and triumph. That evening, she dined quietly with George, Charlotte, and Louis in their private apartments. The children chattered about their day at school, blissfully unaware of the significance of their mother's earlier meetings. This was what grounded her, these moments of normalcy amid the extraordinary circumstances of their lives. "Mummy, will you wear a tiara to the dinner?" Charlotte asked, her eyes bright with interest. "Not this time, darling, but I will wear a very special necklace that belonged to Granny Diana." George, old enough to understand more of the implications, looked up sharply. "Dad's mum's necklace?" "Yes, sweetheart. A beautiful blue stone that matches my engagement ring. Will people take lots of pictures? George asked, a note of worry in his voice. He was becoming increasingly aware of the media attention their family attracted. Probably, Kate answered honestly. But that's okay. Sometimes sharing these special moments helps people feel connected to the important work we do. Lewis, typically, was more interested in whether there would be dessert at the state dinner than in jewelry or photography. His innocent questions about French pastries lightened the mood, reminding Kate of what really mattered. After tucking the children into bed, Kate found herself in her study, reviewing the final preparations for the dinner. Her laptop displayed seating charts, menu cards, and briefing notes on each guest. But her mind kept drifting to that room in Kensington Palace, to the necklace waiting behind glass. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. William entered, looking tired from his trip, but smiling warmly. I caught an earlier flight, he explained, crossing to kiss her. I wanted to be here tonight. Kate felt the tension she'd been carrying all day begin to ease. How did the Scotland meetings go? Productive. But tell me about your day. Dad called me after your meeting. Kate raised an eyebrow. Did he? Said you handled a difficult conversation with grace and wisdom. High praise from him. They settled onto the sofa together, and Kate recounted the day's events. William listened intently, his expression shifting from concern to pride to something more complex when she described Charles's memories of giving Diana the necklace. He never talks about those things, William said quietly. The personal moments, the attempts to make things work. It must have been hard for him to share that with you. I think he needed to, Kate reflected, like he's been carrying it alone for too long. William was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, Mum wore that necklace to my confirmation. I remember because she let me help her with a clasp. Her hands were shaking a bit. She was nervous about seeing Dad's side of the family all together. But when she put on that necklace, something changed. She stood straighter, smiled brighter. Like armor, as you said. Kate took his hand. Are you sure you're okay with this? Really okay. Not just being supportive. William turned to face her fully. Kate, you've spent years being careful about Mum's legacy, trying not to overstep or invite comparisons. But you're the Princess of Wales now. That comes with all the history, good and bad. Wearing her jewelry isn't about replacing her or competing with her memory. It's about continuation, about showing that the values she fought for, compassion, service, using privilege for good, live on. When did you become so wise? Kate asked, touching his cheek. I had good teachers, he replied. Mum, Dad in his way, my grandparents. And you. You've shown me that it's possible to honor the past without being imprisoned by it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of the day settling around them like a familiar cloak. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more preparations, the relentless march toward the state dinner. But tonight, they had each other and the quiet certainty that they were walking the right path. I should review the briefing notes, Kate said eventually, though she made no move to get up. 5 more minutes, William bargained, pulling her closer. The notes will still be there. Kate smiled and relaxed against him. Outside, London hummed with its evening rhythms, unaware of the small dramas playing out in palace rooms. But inside, in this private space carved out of public life, 2 people who had never asked for these roles but had embraced them nonetheless found strength in their partnership. The sapphire necklace waited in its case, patient as it had been for years. Soon it would emerge into the light again, carrying with it all the hopes and heartaches of the past. But it would also carry something new, the steady determination of a woman who had learned to walk in giant footsteps while leaving her own mark on the path. The state dinner was still days away, but the real work had already begun. Not just the logistics and protocols, but the deeper work of weaving past and present into a tapestry strong enough to support the future. Kate closed her eyes and let herself rest for these 5 minutes William had bargained for, knowing that tomorrow would demand all her strength and grace. In the quiet of their private sitting room, with William's steady breathing beside her and the weight of Diana's legacy settling more comfortably on her shoulders, Kate felt ready for whatever came next. The courage stone would soon be hers to wear, but the courage itself had been building all along, nurtured by love, duty, and the gradual understanding that she didn't have to be Diana to honor her memory. She just had to be herself, fully and authentically, while carrying forward the best of what had come before. The morning of the dress rehearsal arrived with typical London weather, gray skies, threatening rain, and a chill that seemed to seep through the palace walls. Kate woke early, her mind immediately racing through the checklist of preparations still needed for the state dinner. Beside her, William slept on, exhausted from his travels and the emotional weight of the past few days. Moving quietly so as not to wake him, Kate slipped in her robe and made her way to the small sitting room adjoining their bedroom. Her assistant had already left the morning papers and briefing notes, along with a pot of Earl Grey tea. The headlines were predictably focused on the upcoming state visit, with speculation about everything from the menu to the guest list. Her phone buzzed with a message from Natasha. Margaret Whitfield will arrive with the jewelry at 10 a.m. Hair and makeup team confirmed for 10:30. Kate sipped her tea and opened her laptop to review the latest diplomatic briefings. The French delegation had expanded to include the Minister of Culture and several prominent business leaders. Each edition required careful consideration of protocols, seating arrangements, and conversation topics. A gentle knock at the door preceded Lauren's entry. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness. The children are having breakfast with Maria. Prince George asked if he could speak with you before school." Kate smiled. "Send him in, please." George appeared moments later, already dressed in his school uniform, but with that slightly rumpled look that 8-year-old boys seemed to perfect. His expression was serious, reminding Kate forcefully of William at the same age. "Morning, darling," Kate said, opening her arms for a hug. "What's on your mind?" George settled beside her on the sofa, his usual energy subdued. "Mom, some of the boys at school were talking about Granny Diana yesterday. They said their parents told them you're going to wear her jewels, and that it's a big deal." Kate set down her tea, giving George her full attention. "How did that make you feel?" "Confused," George admitted. "I mean, I know about Granny Diana, and Dad talks about her sometimes. But the boys made it sound like something bad might happen because of the necklace." Kate's heart ached for her sensitive son, already learning to navigate the complexities of his heritage. "What do you think they meant by something bad?" George fidgeted with the edge of his school blazer. "They said newspapers will write stories, and people might say mean things about you or Dad. Thomas Bradley's mom told him it would bring up painful memories for Grandpa." Kate took a moment to formulate her response, knowing that this conversation would shape George's understanding of his family's history. "George, you know how sometimes in your history lessons, you learn about things that happened long ago that were both happy and sad?" George nodded. "Well, Granny Diana's life was like that. She did wonderful things and helped many people, but there were also difficult times. The necklace I'm going to wear is part of that story. When I wear it, yes, some people might remember the sad parts. But I hope they'll also remember the good parts. How brave she was, how much she cared about others. But why wear it if it might upset people?" George asked with the directness of childhood. "Because, my darling, sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to continue their work. By wearing Granny Diana's necklace to help strengthen our friendship with France, I'm showing that her legacy of bringing people together lives on. Does that make sense?" George considered this, his young face thoughtful. "Like when we use great-granny's recipes at Christmas. We're remembering her, but also making new memories." Kate felt a rush of pride at his perception. "Exactly like that. You're very wise, you know." George smiled, some of his worry easing. "Will you tell me stories about Granny Diana? Dad sometimes does, but I think he gets sad." "Of course I will. Would you like to hear about the time she took your father and Uncle Harry to the cinema in disguise?" George's eyes widened with delight, and Kate spent the next few minutes sharing one of William's favorite memories of normal moments with his mother. By the time George left for school, his spirits were notably lighter, though Kate made a mental note to discuss with William how to better prepare the children for public attention on family history. After the children departed for school, Kate threw herself into the day's preparations. She attended a briefing with the Foreign Office team, reviewed security protocols with the protection officers, and had a final consultation with the executive chef about dietary restrictions and preferences. At precisely 10 o'clock, Margaret Whitfield arrived with two security officers, carrying an unassuming black case that belied its precious contents. They made their way to Kate's dressing room, where Natasha had already laid out the emerald gown and accessories. "Your Royal Highness," Margaret said, her weathered hands steady as she set down the case. "I brought the full set as His Majesty instructed. Necklace, earrings, and there's also a bracelet that matches, though it was acquired separately." The security officers positioned themselves discreetly as Margaret opened the case. Even in the soft lighting of the dressing room, the sapphire seemed to glow with inner fire. Kate found herself holding her breath as Margaret lifted the necklace from its velvet bed. "May I?" Margaret asked, and Kate nodded, turning to face the full-length mirror. The weight of the necklace was surprising, substantial enough to be constantly aware of its presence. As Margaret fastened the intricate clasp, Kate watched her reflection transform. The deep blue of the sapphire brought out the color in her eyes, while the surrounding diamonds caught every movement of light. "The earrings," Margaret continued, handing them to Kate with careful reverence. They were stunning drops that echoed the necklace's design, each featuring a smaller sapphire surrounded by diamonds. As Kate put them on, Natasha circled her, examining the effect from every angle. "The proportions are perfect," she murmured. "The necklace is substantial without being overwhelming. With your hair up, the whole effect will be magnificent." The hairstylist, Alexander, arrived with his team and immediately began working his magic. He created an elegant chignon that sat low on Kate's neck, allowing the earrings to be fully visible while ensuring the necklace remained the focal point. "I'm adding a few strategic pins here," Alexander explained as he worked. "You'll be moving, dancing, greeting people. We need to ensure everything stays perfectly in place without looking stiff." The makeup artist, Sarah, kept the look classic but luminous, using subtle techniques to ensure Kate's skin would photograph beautifully under both natural and artificial light. "The jewelry is so spectacular," she said, "that we want your face to glow but not compete. Think Grace Kelly meets modern princess." As the transformation neared completion, Kate stood before the mirror in full regalia. The emerald gown flowed elegantly to the floor, its rich color providing the perfect backdrop for the sapphire's brilliance. But more than the physical beauty of the ensemble, Kate was struck by the sense of continuity she felt. "You look like a princess from a fairy tale," Natasha said softly, then caught herself. "I mean, you're a princess, but you know what I mean?" Kate smiled. "I do know, and thank you." Margaret approached with a photographer who specialized in archival documentation. "For the official records, Your Royal Highness. These pieces haven't been photographed being worn in over 2 decades. As Kate posed for the documentary photographs, she thought about all the other women who had worn royal jewels through the centuries, each adding their chapter to an ongoing story. She wasn't replacing anyone or competing with ghosts. She was simply the current guardian of these treasures, using them as they were meant to be used, as symbols of continuity, diplomacy, and service. "One moment, Your Royal Highness," Margaret said, studying Kate with a critical eye. "The bracelet would complete the set, but it might be too much with the gloves you'll be wearing." Kate considered this. "Let's try it." The bracelet was delicate despite its obvious value, designed to complement rather than compete with the necklace. When Margaret fastened it around Kate's wrist, the effect was cohesive without being overwhelming. "Keep it," Natasha declared. "You'll remove your gloves for dinner anyway, and it adds another layer of significance without being ostentatious." A knock at the door interrupted their session. William entered, stopping short when he saw Kate in full regalia. His expression cycled through surprise, admiration, and something deeper that brought tears to his eyes. "You look," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Ridiculous," Kate suggested with a nervous laugh. "Over the top? Like I'm playing dress-up?" "Perfect," William said firmly. You look absolutely perfect. Mom will be so proud. He approached slowly, as if afraid to disturb the careful construction of hair and makeup. The last time I saw that necklace being worn, I was 15. It was one of her last official engagements before. He trailed off, but Kate understood. Before the divorce was finalized. Before the car crash. Before everything changed. Should I choose something else? Kate asked, suddenly, uncertain. If it's too painful. No, William interrupted. No, this is right. It's time. Past time, really. He gently took her hands, careful of the jewelry. You're not wearing her necklace, Kate. You're wearing the Princess of Wales's necklace. There's a difference. The distinction was subtle, but important. This wasn't about channeling Diana or replacing her. It was about the role itself, the position that existed before Diana, and would continue long after they were all gone. His Majesty is here, Lauren announced from the doorway. He asked if he might have a word. Kate and William exchanged glances. Charles rarely made impromptu visits to their private quarters. Send him in, Kate said, steeling herself for whatever reaction Charles might have to seeing the jewels in use. Charles entered with his usual precise movements, but stopped abruptly when he saw Kate. His face went through a series of expressions too quickly to read before settling into something like wonder mixed with old pain. My God, he said softly. It's like stepping back in time. I can change if you prefer, Kate began, but Charles held up a hand. No, it's not that. It's just remarkable how different the same jewels can look on different women. He approached slowly, examining the ensemble with an artist's eye. On Diana, the sapphire seemed to echo her eyes, making the whole effect quite ethereal. On you, Catherine, it's more grounded, more regal. Same stones, entirely different story. Kate felt the tension in the room ease slightly. Thank you, Your Majesty. Charles cleared his throat. I actually came to bring you something. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. These are my mother's. She wore them to state dinners when she wanted to make a particular impression without wearing the crown jewels. He opened the box to reveal a pair of hair combs adorned with small diamonds in an Art Deco design. They were exquisite in their simplicity, clearly valuable, but not ostentatious. She called them her secret weapons. Charles continued with a fond smile. Said they made her feel properly royal without the weight of a tiara. I thought, well, they might complement what you're wearing. Alexander stepped forward eagerly. Oh, these are perfect. I can incorporate them into the chignon. They'll catch the light beautifully without competing with the necklace. As the hairstylist carefully added the combs to Kate's hair, Charles watched with an expression of almost paternal pride. You know, Catherine, when William first introduced you to us, I worried whether you understood what you were taking on. The weight of history, the constant scrutiny, the impossible expectations. I'm still learning, Kate admitted. We all are, Charles said. Even after all these years, I'm still learning. But watching you navigate these waters with such grace, well, it gives an old man hope for the future of this institution. William moved to stand beside his father, and for a moment, 3 generations of royal history stood reflected in the mirror. Charles with his burden of past mistakes and hard-won wisdom, William bridging past and future, and Kate representing new possibilities while honoring old traditions. Right, Charles said briskly, his moment of sentiment passing. I'll leave you to your preparations. The French ambassador called this morning to say the president is particularly looking forward to meeting you, Catherine. Apparently, his wife has been singing your praises since your last meeting. After Charles left, the room seemed to exhale collectively. Kate caught Margaret dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Forgive me, Your Royal Highness, the elderly woman said. It's just, I've waited so long to see these pieces worn again, to see them serving their purpose, and to see His Majesty here supporting it. It's more than I dared hope. The next hour was spent in final adjustments and preparations. Kate practiced walking in the full ensemble, ensuring she could move gracefully despite the weight of the jewelry and the length of the gown. She rehearsed sitting and standing the proper way to turn her head to maximize the jewelry's impact without appearing to show it off. Remember, Natasha coached, you're not wearing the jewelry, it's wearing you. Every movement should be natural, as if you've worn these pieces 1,000 times. James arrived with the final briefing notes and proposed social media posts. The palace photographers will get exclusive shots before the dinner, he explained. We'll release one official photo an hour before the guests arrive, with a caption about the diplomatic significance of the visit and a subtle mention of the jewelry's provenance. Kate reviewed the proposed caption. The Princess of Wales prepares to welcome President and Madame Moreau for tonight's state dinner, wearing sapphires from the royal collection as a symbol of the enduring friendship between our nations. Perfect, she approved. Elegant and informative without being sensational. As the dress rehearsal concluded, Kate carefully removed the jewelry, watching as Margaret returned each piece to its velvet compartment. The necklace seemed heavier as it left her neck, as if it had accumulated weight from the morning's emotions. Same time on the actual day? Margaret asked, securing the case. Yes, please. And Margaret, Kate called as the older woman prepared to leave. Thank you for taking such good care of these all these years. I know it can't have been easy, guarding them without seeing them worn. Margaret's eyes misted again. It's been an honor, Your Royal Highness. And seeing them today, seeing how right they look on you, it's made the wait worthwhile. After everyone departed, Kate sat alone in her dressing room for a moment, still in the emerald gown, but feeling strangely lighter without the jewelry. She thought about Diana wearing these same pieces, the weight both physical and metaphorical that came with them. She thought about Charles, carrying his regrets and memories while trying to move forward. She thought about William, caught between honoring his mother and supporting his wife. And she thought about herself, Catherine Elizabeth Middleton from Berkshire, who had fallen in love with a prince and found herself custodian of a legacy she never could have imagined. The girl who had once been too nervous to speak in public now prepared to host presidents and diplomats, wearing jewels worth more than most people's homes. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news about you wearing Diana's necklace. So proud of you, darling. Dad and I are thinking of you. Remember to breathe and be yourself. That's all anyone can ask. Kate smiled, grateful as always for her parents' grounding influence. They had watched their daughter transform from Kate to Catherine, from girlfriend to princess. But, to them, she remained simply their Katie. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. Charlotte peeked in, her eyes widening at the sight of her mother in the elaborate gown. "Mummy, you look like a real princess," she exclaimed then, clapped a hand over her mouth. "I mean, you're a real princess, but you look like a storybook one." Kate laughed and held out her arms. "Come here, darling." Carefully, though, this dress is quite delicate. Charlotte approached with exaggerated care, as if the dress might shatter at her touch. "Will I get to wear pretty dresses like this when I'm older?" "If you want to," Kate said carefully. "But remember, the dress isn't what makes someone special. It's what they do while wearing it that matters." "Like helping people?" Charlotte asked. "Exactly like helping people." Charlotte considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. "Then I'll wear pretty dresses and help people, like you and Granny Diana." Kate hugged her daughter close, feeling the continuity of generations in that simple statement. The jewelry might be locked away again, the gown would be carefully preserved, but the values they represented, service, compassion, using privilege for good, will be passed on regardless of what anyone wore. "That sounds like an excellent plan," Kate told her daughter. "Now, let's get Mummy out of this dress before Louis sees it and decides to play dress up too." As she changed back into her regular clothes, Kate felt a sense of completion. The dress rehearsal had been about more than practicing for the state dinner. It had been about claiming her place fully in the royal narrative, about showing that she could honor the past while creating her own future. The actual dinner was still 2 days away, but the hardest part was already done. She had worn Diana's courage stone and made it her own. She had navigated the complex emotions of the royal family and emerged with their blessing. Most importantly, she had proven to herself that she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The sapphire necklace was back in its vault, but its purpose had been served. It had reminded everyone, Kate included, that jewels were meant to be worn, that legacy was meant to be lived, and that courage could be passed down just as surely as precious stones. As Kate left the palace that afternoon for a scheduled visit to one of her charities, she felt different. Not because of the jewelry or the dress rehearsal, but because she had finally fully stepped into her role. The shadow of the past would always be there, but she was no longer trying to escape it or compete with it. She was simply Catherine, Princess of Wales, carrying forward a legacy while creating her own. And that, she realized, was exactly as it should be. The day of the state dinner dawned crisp and clear, a rarity for London in late autumn. Kate woke before her alarm, her mind immediately alert with anticipation. Beside her, William was already awake, staring at the ceiling with a distant expression she recognized as his processing face. "Morning," she said softly, reaching for his hand. He turned to her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Big day. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Kate admitted. "Excited. Ready." "You." William was quiet for a moment. "I dreamed about her last night." "Mum." She was getting ready for an event, humming that song she loved, Candle in the Wind. She turned to me and said, "Make sure Kate knows about the clasp. It sticks sometimes." Kate felt goosebumps rise on her arms. The clasp on the sapphire necklace had indeed been temperamental during yesterday's rehearsal, requiring Margaret's experienced fingers to secure it properly. "Maybe it was your subconscious remembering," Kate suggested gently. "Maybe," William agreed, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Either way, she'd be proud of you today." "I'm proud of you." They lay quietly for a few more minutes, gathering strength from each other's presence before the whirlwind of the day began. Soon enough, the palace machinery would spring into motion, every minute scheduled and accounted for. But for now, they had this pocket of calm. The morning progressed with military precision. Kate attended a final security briefing, where every detail of the evening's arrangements was reviewed one last time. The protection officers had coordinated with French security, establishing protocols that balance safety with diplomacy. "The president's wife has requested a private moment with you before the receiving line," the head of security informed her. "We've arranged for the blue drawing room to be available." Kate nodded, making a mental note. Such private moments often yielded the most productive diplomatic conversations, away from the formal constraints of the main event. After the security briefing, she met with the palace protocol team to review the evening's choreography. Every movement had been planned, from the initial greeting to the final farewell. Kate would stand to Charles's left in the receiving line, with William on her other side, a visual representation of the monarchy's past, present, and future. "Remember," the protocol chief reminded her, "the president speaks excellent English, but appreciates when others attempt French. Your pronunciation has improved remarkably, Your Royal Highness." Kate had indeed been practicing intensively, determined to deliver her toast in French without stumbling. It was a small gesture, but an important one, showing respect for the visitor's culture and language. By midday, the palace was buzzing with activity. Florists arranged magnificent displays that incorporated both roses and lilies, while the kitchens operated at full capacity, preparing the elaborate menu. Kate did a walkthrough of the state dining room, checking every detail from the placement of name cards to the angle of the flowers. "Your Royal Highness," the head butler approached with a slight bow. "The French ambassador has sent a personal note." Kate read the handwritten message, which expressed the ambassador's delight that she would be wearing Diana's sapphire and recalled a particular evening in Paris when Diana had worn the same necklace to a charity gala the ambassador had attended as a young diplomat. "Everyone has a memory," Kate murmured to herself, understanding more fully the weight of what she was undertaking. The jewelry wasn't just beautiful. It was a repository of countless moments and memories, each person who had encountered Diana while she wore it carrying their own version of the story. At 3 o'clock, she retired to her apartments to begin the transformation. Margaret Whitfield was already there with the jewelry, and the hair and makeup teams stood ready. This time, the atmosphere was less nervous, more purposeful. They had rehearsed this. Now it was time for the performance. As Alexander worked on her hair, weaving in Charles's gifted combs with practiced ease, Kate's phone buzzed with messages of support. Her sister Pippa sent a photo of their parents watching the news coverage, both beaming with pride. Her brother James simply texted, "Knock him dead, sis." "The children want to see you before they go to the nursery wing," Lauren informed her. "Send them in, but warn them Mummy's hair is rather elaborate," Kate said. George, Charlotte, and Louis entered with the exaggerated care of children who had been thoroughly briefed on proper behavior. Their eyes widened at the sight of their mother mid-transformation. "You look like a queen," Louis declared with typical enthusiasm. "Not quite," Kate laughed. "But thank you, darling." George, ever the serious eldest, studied the scene with interest. "Is that Granny Diana's necklace?" He pointed to the open case where the sapphire gleamed. "It is," Kate confirmed. "Would you like to see it closer?" All three children gathered around as Margaret carefully lifted the necklace for their inspection. She began telling them about the stones, how sapphires were formed deep in the earth over millions of years, how diamonds were the hardest natural substance known to man. "So it's very old?" Charlotte asked. "The stones are ancient," Margaret explained. "But the necklace itself was made about 35 years ago for your grandmother." "That's not very old," Louis observed. "My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, is older than that." The adults laughed, the moment of levity breaking any lingering tension. After the children left with promises to watch some of the dinner on the nursery television, the final preparations began in earnest. The emerald gown slipped on like liquid silk, fitting perfectly thanks to minor adjustments made after the rehearsal. Sarah applied the final touches to Kate's makeup, ensuring it would photograph beautifully under the state dining room chandeliers. And then came the moment Kate had been both anticipating and dreading. Margaret approached with the necklace, her movements ceremonial in their precision. "Your Royal Highness," she said formally. "May I?" Kate nodded and turned to face the mirror. As Margaret's fingers worked the troublesome clasp that William had dreamed about, Kate watched her reflection transform. The woman in the mirror looked regal, confident, every inch a princess. But Kate knew the truth. Inside, her heart was racing, and her palms were damp despite the powder. "There," Margaret said with satisfaction. "Perfect." The earrings came next, then the bracelet. With each piece, Kate felt the weight of expectation increase. But alongside that weight came something else, a strange sense of companionship, as if Diana's courage was indeed being transmitted through the stones. William arrived just as the final touches were being completed. He was already in his dress uniform, metals gleaming against the dark fabric. He stopped in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Well?" Kate asked suddenly, uncertain. "Too much." William crossed the room in quick strides and took her hands. "You're magnificent," he said simply. "And Mum would be so thrilled to see her jewelry being used to strengthen diplomatic ties." She understood the soft power of royal glamour better than anyone. James appeared with a tablet showing social media reactions to the officially released photograph. "It's extraordinary, Your Royal Highness." The response is overwhelmingly positive. The French media in particular are calling it a beautiful tribute to the friendship between our nations. Kate glanced at the tablet, seeing the carefully composed image of herself in profile, the sapphire catching the light. The palace photographers had done their job perfectly, creating an image that was both glamorous and dignified. "His Majesty is ready to begin the receiving line in 15 minutes, Lauren announced. Kate took a deep breath, centering herself for the performance ahead. This wasn't just about wearing jewelry or hosting a dinner. This was about embodying the monarchy's role in modern diplomacy, about showing that the institution could honor its past while remaining relevant to its present. The walk to the reception hall seemed both endless and too short. Palace staff lined the corridors, offering smiles and subtle nods of approval. Kate had learned to draw strength from these moments, from the hundreds of people who worked behind the scenes to make nights like this possible. Charles waited at the entrance to the reception hall, resplendent in his military uniform with the blue garter ribbon across his chest. His eyes went immediately to the necklace, and Kate saw a flash of complex emotion before his expression settled into approval. "Catherine," he said warmly, "you look absolutely splendid. The French delegation just arrived. They're very eager to meet you." The next moments passed in a carefully choreographed blur. The president and his wife entered, the formal greetings were exchanged, and then came the private moment Madame Moreau had requested. In the blue drawing room, away from the cameras and protocol officers, the French president's wife took Kate's hands with genuine warmth.